Welcome everyone to IT Audit Webinar Training via Practical Application presented jointly by AuditNet and Richard Cascarino and Associates. This webinar is part of the Training Without Travel series covering IT audit. Today's webinar covers the audit use of CAATs. My name is Jim Kaplan. I'm founder and owner of AuditNet, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Joining us is Richard Cascarino, principal of Richard Cascarino and Associates, who will cover this 2-hour webinar. There's a screen with Richard's information. Let me have Richard introduce himself, and then I'll go over the housekeeping items for today, and then we'll let Richard get right into the webinar. Richard?
Thanks, Jim. Welcome everyone to this webinar. As Jim said, it's the webinar on computer-assisted audit tools and techniques. For those of you who are only joining us on this particular webinar, let me introduce myself. My name is Richard Cascarino. I'm the principal of Richard Cascarino and Associates. We're based out of Steamboat Springs in Colorado and Johannesburg in South Africa. My background, I have a depressing number of years experience in audit training and consultancy. I'm a past president of the IIA in South Africa, a member of OSACA, a member of the ACFE, and author of 3 books which you can see on the screen. Probably the most relevant to this particular course is the Auditor's Guide to IT Auditing. Let me pass you back to Jim, and he will take you through the webinar housekeeping.
Thanks, Richard. You should have received these slides this morning, and they cover all of the housekeeping items. Just want to remind you that we are recording today's webinar, and you will receive a link to that recording. The links should be ready by tomorrow, so you'll get a follow-up email, and you'll get the link to the recording. Because we are operating under NASBA rules, we are required to ask polling questions during the webinar. CPE certificates will be sent via email to those who answer all of the polling questions. If you're joining us from a tablet or a netbook device, you may not be able to answer the polling questions online, so please accumulate your answers in a single email and then email them to us, and we'll go ahead and record your answers. The CPE certificates and link will be sent to the email address that you registered with GoToWebinar. It's important that you provided us with an accurate email address and that you can receive attachments in order to receive the CPE certificate. You can ask questions during the webinar. Submit your questions via the chat box on your screen. We'll answer them usually at the time that we break for a polling question. After the webinar is over, you'll have an opportunity to provide feedback. Please complete the feedback questionnaire to help us improve our webinars. The next screen shows you the disclaimer, and again, that was sent out this morning, so I'm not going to read it. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Richard so he can get into today's Audit Use of CAATs IT Audit webinar. Richard?
Thanks, Jim. Okay, what are we going to cover today? We're going to be starting off looking at system testing techniques. One of the problems that we have traditionally had with computer systems is, how do you know if it works? How do you know if 2 + 2 always equals 4? How do you know if I put information in that it will end up where it's supposed to be, and if I take information out that it came from the right place? Now, the traditional way of auditing within that environment has been to audit around the system. So we look at inputs and we look at outputs, and we say, do the inputs seem to match the outputs? Do the outputs seem to match where they came from? And that was okay in the days when we had paper trails and where there was a 1-for-1 matchup between things going in and things coming out. But with today's environment, we have internally generated transactions. The days when the purchasing manager would make out a purchasing order form and enter it into the computer and receive a printout, which he would then send by mail to the supplier. And when he got the invoice in from the supplier, it would then be recaptured into the computer. And then when a check was produced, it would be signed off and sent out. Those days are gone in many, many instances. What happens now is that the system, the computer system itself, will monitor inventory levels and recognize that inventory has dropped below reorder level. It will calculate the economic order quantity based on previous usage. It will look up a table of authorized suppliers. It will select one of those based on previous performance, costs, etc., and it will electronically send them an order. The goods will come in, an electronic invoice will come in, the invoice will be matched against the purchase order, matched against good received notes, and eventually the invoice will end up in our accounts payable system, which will result in an electronic funds transfer going to the supplier to pay for the goods, or going to our bank to tell our bank to tell their bank that they now have the money. And there's no paper trail. So how do you audit in that environment? And the only way you can audit through the computer is to use the computer to audit the computer. Now, having said that, there's a tremendous amount of stuff that you can do without going into the computer. We'll take a look at auditing of computerized application systems, but we'll also look at auditing non-computerized systems. There's a role for CAATs in that area as well. Look at different kinds of CAATs. The automatic reaction when you talk to an auditor and you say CAATs is they immediately think of product. Product like IDEA, product like Excel, product like ACL. And these are simply software packages. Now, yes, you can use those as CAATs. Some of them were written to be CAATs. But that's not the only kind of technique. You can use things like source code review, running test data through systems, doing parallel simulation, running integrated test facilities, using snapshot techniques or SCARFs, system collection audit review file. All of these are valid techniques, and we'll take a look at each of them in turn because each of them has a role to play. We'll also take a look at retrieval software. Now, retrieval software may well be when you buy a package, that the package itself comes with interrogation software that will allow you to retrieve information from it. It's not designed for auditors, it's designed for end users. But nevertheless, you can use the same software to do the similar type of interrogations. We'll look at generalized audit software. Generalized audit software, software written specifically for auditors to do the kinds of things that auditors normally do. We'll take a look at specialized audit software. Specialized audit software written for a specialized environment to do one form of audit testing. They tend to be expensive. They tend to be of limited use, but in certain environments, it's the only way that you can audit it. So we'll take a look at those. We'll have a look at utility software. The machine itself comes standard within the operating environment with utility programs, standardized programs that do standardized things. If I want to copy, I'm not going to use generalized audit software. I'm going to use copy. If I want to find out if a file exists, I'm not going to try and open it up in IDEA or ACL. I'm going to use a search to see if the file exists. We'll also finish up by taking a look at probably the two most common pieces of generalized audit software on the market, ACL and IDEA. So we'll take a look at all of those. Why? Because we want to test systems. So, next question. What is a system? Again, you can get locked into this philosophy that the system is a piece of software running on the computer. It's not. A system is everything to do with executing some kind of business function. So there'll be a manual component to a system before it even gets to the computer, where someone will say, wouldn't it be a good idea to pay somebody today? Who shall we pay? How much overtime have they made? There'll be the computer application, the bit that says 2 + 2 = 4, net pay equals gross pay minus deductions, etc. There'll be the software governing the environment, the communication software, the operating system, the database management system, the security system. None of these having to do with actually executing the business function, but all of them essential for the business function application to run. And afterwards, there's a component after the stuff comes out of the computer. Someone sees something on a screen. What are they going to do with that information? Do they know what to do with it? And these days, of course, we have incredibly complex integrated systems. In the old days, it was easy. We had the payroll system. We had accounts receivable. We had the financial ledger. Now we are running integrated packages which do the whole kit and caboodle for the whole organization. And everything has to fit together. All of these, theoretically, are subject to control. Now we talked, for those of you who are on the whole series, we talked on the first day about different things that happen in the computer that can be subject to control. So if we look at the manual part, pre-computer, we've got our standard business control objectives. If you're running the payroll, the business control objectives are to pay the right people the right amount of money when they are due to be paid at the right rate. And typically, before it hits the computer, our business control is exercised by adequate supervision, people doing the right things, appropriate authorization, authentication. One of the key controls that we have in any business environment is segregation of duties. And segregation of duties says, I can do these things, you can do those things. I cannot do yours, you cannot do mine. But for that to work, there has to be certain way of authenticating me and authenticating you. I have the key, you don't. I can open the door, you can't. I can get into the filing cabinet, you can't. Something has to authenticate me as opposed to you. When that comes inside the computer, again we need a way of authenticating who the user is and who they claim to be. Otherwise, those controls that we had before it hit the computer no longer work. Now anyone can go anywhere and do anything unless you stop them. And again, we have our standard business procedures, our operating procedures. Now, once this lot hits the computer, then what happens? Well, overall, the control objectives are still not changed. In the payroll computer system, we still want to pay the right people, the right amount, at the right rate, etc. But the control points may have varied. Instead of having supervisory overview and signed off by the head of the payroll section, those control points have migrated inside the computer. Some of them may still exist as manual. Many of them will be computerized. And the degree of effective control is typically a trade-off for efficient control. The more control you want in the computer, the slower it's going to go, the more overhead, the longer it's going to take, the less performance you're going to get as it checks everything. When I start up my computer, generally if I'm running a training course, and people see me starting my computer, they say, "Oh, your computer takes a long time to start up." Yes, it does, because on my computer I've got 2 different antivirus programs, 2 separate anti-malware programs, and 2 separate firewalls. And these things have all got to come up and sync themselves before I can get in. The reason I've got them is I spend a lot of time going into hackers' websites and fraudsters' websites to see what they are doing and what they are looking at and what they're planning on. So I need to be proof against someone following me down the line. But the more control I put in, the slower my machine goes. So there's a trade-off between how effective the control you need to have and how efficient control is essential. Application controls we talked in terms of. Our primary control areas are the recording, classifying, and summarizing of authorized transactions. That's what we do in application systems. We take things in, we classify them, add them up, make sure that the transactions are supposed to be going in, we update files, and then we report on the results of processing. And the critical areas for any management is, can we rely on this information? Am I seeing everything? Is it accurate? And is it valid? Was it authorized in the first place? Has something stopped anybody going in and changing it? Within the computing environment, as I said, we have the operating system that we have to worry about. If you want to know how to break into Windows, then go on the web and say breaking into Windows, and you'll find a whole stack of things that will come up from bulletin boards that will tell you when people configure Windows, they usually forget to do this, and this door is left open, etc. Part of our job when we're running CAATs is to look inside the operating environment and see what's going on. If it's a simple Windows type operating system, I don't know how many of you have ever looked at the registry. But just to give you an idea, I'm going to fire off within my own machine the registry editor. Do I wish to allow this program to make changes? And what you can see on your screen now, I'll make it full size. This is my registry. And what you're looking at is my local machine. Within the registry, there are 5 classes: HKey class root, HKey current user, HKey local machine, users, current configuration, etc. Within each of these, there are strings of parameters. So there's my hardware, there's my security, there's my software. This is all the software I'm running on my machine. Within the software, here's my system. That's my current control set. These are the services that can run within my machine. And each of these has got parameters which may or may not be set and which can be adjusted. Now, at its ultimate, if you are conducting, for example, a security audit, you're going to have to get into this stuff and see what is in there, and is it what it's supposed to be? Now, the first question we have as auditors is, who put it there? Who can change it? On whose authority? Where are the records? Show me the proof. Show me the last time it was updated. And it's all contained within that. This is not an IT security webinar, and this is not a Windows webinar. That's Windows. That's the same in every single operating environment that you're going to come across. There will be an equivalent. If this was a big IBM mainframe running Xeos, that file would be sys1.parmlib, but it would be a parameter file dictating how the operating system works. If I was running networking software such as VTAM on the big IBMs, I would have one called sys1.vtam list. And again, contained within that are all of the parameters. Now, the only way you can get into those is to use a CAAT to look inside it. The CAAT I used to look at the registry was the registry editor, a standard package or a standard piece of software that comes with Windows. You do not want everyone and his grandfather trying to get into that. I've got a question that's come in. How does the external auditor best identify the intersection of computer environment, application controls, and financial data and reporting? Have I seen CAATs used in financial statement audits? Yes, it's the short word. How do you identify the intersection of the computer environment? First thing you need to know before you can do anything on the accounts, is the environment secure? Because if that operating environment is not secure, then those accounts can say anything that any programmer or user is allowed to tell them to say. I can go in as a programmer and run a utility. I could use within Windows, I can use Windows Editor, and I simply go into the file and say, I don't like that 5, make it a 9. When it prints it a 5 so that the auditors can see a 5, but on the machine make it a 9. So how would I find that? Well, I can use a CAAT to run against the data files to say, never mind what the printouts tell me, what do the data files say? Now compare that to the printouts. Is it the same? And if I've got printouts, I can take the printouts independently, scan them in, and convert that to a data file. So I've got my data file from the printouts, and I've got the data files from the live data, and I can compare those two to see, can I place reliance that what's on the printout is what's inside the machine. Still doesn't mean that what's inside the machine is legitimate. So again, I can look at my database management system and see within that, who can access what pieces of data and what are they able to do to it. And I can use CAATs to look through my data dictionary to find out who can go where and do what. Then I can go and say, okay, Mr. Supervisor, Miss Supervisor, excuse me one second, I apologize. How do you know that nobody's doing that? Are records kept, are log files kept? Oh yeah, they're kept inside the computer. Fine, now I can interrogate the log files in the computer. So all of these things are open to being audited. But before I can place reliance on anything in that computer, I need to know the environment is secured. Otherwise, I could simply be looking at a set of files that they keep for the auditors. Okay. I had a big argument at one time. I used to work for a small firm that you've probably never heard of called PricewaterhouseCoopers, in the days when it was called Coopers & Lybrand. And I ran the South African CAATs division. Okay. And we had some significant problems getting the message through to partners that you are signing off books of account based on reports that are coming out of computers, and you don't know if that computer system is secured. Now, what we used to do was we would go in once a year to look at the operating environment, make sure that that was secured, and then make sure that management had the appropriate controls in place to make sure it continued to be secured, so that when they came to do the year-end audit, they knew that what they were looking at was coming out of a secured system. We've also got the control environment that runs all of these things, operation controls, change control, to make sure that if we've got it locked up, nobody can simply come along and unlock it. Operation controls, the operations are the custodians of our systems. So they look after physical sites, operation standards, libraries and file controls, We talked about this on the first day. Backup, restart controls, disaster recovery planning, etc. They've also got the supervisory controls, run schedules, so that things are supposed to happen in a certain order. Now the computer keeps logs. Manually, we also keep log books. So the auditor can look at the logbook and see everything ran as normal, there were no reruns, there were no special runs. Then you look at the computer log and you find that the payroll files were accessed at 3 o'clock in the morning. Now there's nothing on the schedule that says we're running the payroll at 3 o'clock in the morning. There's nothing in the clerical log that said the operators ran a special program at 3 o'clock in the morning. So who the hell was accessing those files at that time? Which terminals, which users, why? And I can get that out of my CAATs looking at those logbooks, looking at reconciliation procedures, looking at all the controls we're relying on. They also look after the reliability of information, timeliness, nature and type of information, the speed of error detection and correction, and you can pick that up from the log files again. Appropriateness of management decisions is a lot harder. That you can't run CAATs on. From the CAATs you can tell what was the effect of the management decision, but you can't tell whether it was appropriate or not. You have to look at what decision was made, who made it, on what basis. As far as integrity is concerned, we've talked about some of these already: implementation controls, program security, operations, etc. All of these have some component that impacts inside the machine that we can now go and interrogate. And that brings us to our first polling question. And the first polling question that we have today looks at run schedules. Run schedules are an example of what? Administrative controls, supervisory controls, integrity controls, or operation controls. Once again, you don't have to get the answer right, but you do have to answer to get the CPE. If you are using a mobile device and you cannot enter those online, then retain them till the end and then send in an email. We have 100% voted, so I'll close the poll and share the results. And you can see we have a split between operations and administrative and supervisory. Generally speaking, run schedules are supervisory controls. They operate within the operations area, but not necessarily. This could be within a department where the user, the end user, is choosing when to run certain things. Now, why do we have that schedule? So that someone can look at it and say, did things happen when they were supposed to happen? So it's a supervisory type control. Okay. So how do you select controls for testing? We've got all of these wonderful control areas. We've got all of these wonderful types of tests. Which ones are we going to look at? In any area, whether you're looking inside the operations area, inside systems development, inside the user arena, inside an application system, we are looking at trying to establish the prime controls for the area. I have no idea what happened there. My screen went blank and then came back. We're trying to establish the prime controls for the area. So what we would typically look at is which controls do we rely on over and over and over again? Which ones cover the majority of the risk? We look for controls that would preferably cover several areas. User authentication, password control, typically covers several risk areas within the IT division. But we also want to identify standalone controls, controls which are designed for a specific risk in a specific business area. And the unfortunate thing is, from an audit perspective, we're looking for controls that provide evidence. And a lot of our preventative controls do not leave behind evidence. You get evidence when things are going wrong, commonly. Now, does that mean if there is no evidence that nothing went wrong? Or does it mean there's no evidence? Or does it mean that you're looking in the wrong place? You'll see on the slide it says, do not try to prove a negative. What you don't want to do is try to prove nothing went wrong. Okay? You're trying to establish if something went wrong, would evidence be left behind? If so, where? Let me go and look there. And if there is nowhere that's going to be left behind, then I'm not in a position to prove anything. The common example I use is that everyone can relate to is the lock on the door. Is the lock on the door a good control or not? Well, it depends. First thing it depends on is what are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to lock people in or lock people out? Because that will determine which side of the door the key has to be on. If the objective is to stop things going missing, then how will you know if things have gone missing? Going and checking whether the door is locked will not tell you if things have gone missing. You're going to have to go and look at a loss book, insurance claims, complaints made from members of staff that things have gone missing. You're not going to get that out of examining the lock. So you need to find which controls are going to leave behind evidence, and then we can interrogate those. Our primary areas of concern that we're faced with, that we need our CAATs for, complex computer systems cannot be recreated manually. The only way you can investigate complex systems is to use complex systems. And many of those records that are retained within the computer are intelligible only to computers. They never get printed out. We have a concern that most computer systems will allow multiple access, in some cases from anywhere in the world. And you get one of two attitudes prevailing within management. Either they will turn around and tell you it came out the computer, it must be wrong, or they'll tell you it came out the computer, it must be right, which is a real problem area. So looking at it from that perspective, there's an old saying, to err is human. To really mess it up, you need a computer. And when we talk about disasters in computers, we really mean disasters. If this thing doesn't work and work properly, this is life-threatening to the organization. This can put your company out of business. If we look at the control concepts and IT, the extent of manual controls are reduced. They're not gone, but they're reduced. Many of them have migrated inside the box, or not. Sources of data have shifted. Instead of coming in pieces of paper which then get captured, they're coming in out of somebody's head into a terminal. There is no paper trail. Our transaction trails may be discontinuous. You can't look for signatures on the document. As I said, control points have migrated inside the box, and the opportunity for a human being to look at something and say that's wrong are much less. So we're now trusting our systems. And your documentation becomes critical. You don't have hard copy audit trails. You may or may not have continuity control. And overall, the data custody has shifted out of the control of management into the box. In olden days, Decisions were made in the boardroom. These days, it's a very brave board of directors who say buy if the computer says sell, or who say sell if the computer says buy, and the control has migrated into the machine room to a large extent. If we look at the difference between logical controls and technical controls, most of the auditing that you will be doing as an internal auditor, an external consultant, an external auditor are going to be logical controls, business controls, functional in nature, and they may be enforced by people or they may be enforced by the computer. The technical controls are where you call in your specialist IT auditors to look at the technical complexity, parity controls, security at the operating system level. It's not the kind of thing you're going to do every day. Somebody has to do it at some point, but it's not the kind of thing that a conventional auditor is going to be looking at. So what tools do we have? Well, we've got test data generators. One of the problems with testing computer systems, I'm speaking now with my IT hat on, is how much testing is enough. Okay. Well, basically you test the system until you think you've tested every possible thing that can happen. And then the system goes live and it continues working beautifully. And 3 months later the system crashes because something happened that nobody anticipated. And the immediate reaction will be, this system wasn't tested enough. So you can get automated tools that will generate test data for you. If you have integrated database management systems with active data dictionaries, then you can get software that will look at the schema and sub-schema of the database and say which programs using which transactions will access which pieces of information. Let me generate data to test that access path. They're expensive and they're limited to that particular database management system. We can get flowcharting packages. I don't know how many of you as auditors do your own flowcharting. I do flowcharting occasionally when I'm looking at a business process, nothing to do with the computer. I'm drawing a business process and I want to see where information moves from A to B and where it changes from this form to that form, so that I can see if there's a completeness control and there's an accuracy control. When information goes into a business environment, how do I know it was authorized? When it comes out, how do I know it's kept confidential? So I will flowchart the information flow in order to see how it works. I used to use a package called Flowcharting 3. I now use Microsoft's Visio, not because it's a better package, but because I've got it. Okay, so you use the package that's appropriate to you, that you find easiest to use. Specialized audit software, as I said, we'll take a look at specialized audit software, and we'll have a look at generalized audit software, and we'll take a look at the role of utility programs. Specialized audit software, this is software that you can either buy that will do a specific technique, or you can write yourself if you are a programmer, or you can have written for you. But be aware, this kind of software can do anything that you want it to do, but it's going to cost. It's going to cost because you're going to develop it for this audit and no other. And it's going to take time, and it's going to take expensive resources. If you are going to use it again next year, you're going to have to check, did anything change? Did the file layouts change? Do we have the same audit requirement next year? And if so, that's fine. If it's not, you're going to have to maintain it. And that's going to be expensive. It requires specific IS skills, because even if you're not the person who's writing the software, you're going to have to make sure that that software does what you think it is doing. So you're going to have to verify it. And as it says there, there's a high degree of obsolescence. Use once and throw away. We've got this special inquiry this year. We'll never have that inquiry again. It's going to cost a fortune to make that inquiry. So you use specialized audit software sparingly. Let me give you an example. If I want to look, again, I'll use the big IBMs as an example. If I want to look inside a big IBM operating environment and I want to look at certain log files, there's a log file in there called the SMF log, the System Management Facility log. And there's a problem because it's variable length records. Now that's okay, most audit software can handle variable length records. But the way IBM has structured it, it's a variable length record within a variable length block. And none of the generalized audit software, with one exception, can handle variable length blocks. So what I need then to do is use a utility to strip this information out and put it into fixed length blocks that I can then interrogate with my generalized audit software. Or I need to use SMF Analyzer, which is a piece of software. All it does is analyze SMF log files. If I want to find what jobs were run, who ran them, which user signed them off, which terminal they fired them off from, that's my boy. I will look at the SMF Analyzer. But that's all it does. On the other hand, generalized audit software, the ACLs of this world, the IDEAs of this world, the Arbitus of this world, come with standardized prefabricated audit tests. The kind of thing that every auditor wants to do. I'm looking for missing elements, missing purchase orders in a sequence. I'm looking for missing check numbers on a bank reconciliation. I'm looking for missing invoice numbers. Or I'm looking for duplicates. I'm looking for transactions going through the ledger which have been duplicated. Now that kind of thing, look for duplicates, look for missing numbers, is standard. It's built into them. All I have to tell it is look at that file, this is what the file looks like, show me missing in that sequence, show me duplicates in that sequence, show me duplicate values, show me duplicate customer numbers, show me duplicate countries. Each use can be a one-off because this is not cheap software, but it's cheap to use. So I can use once and throw away because to do it again, it's a piece of cake. Once again, let me break out of this and actually give you an example. An example I'm going to use is IDEA. Okay, now this is IDEA. I'm going to pick up a file. I'll pick up customers. There's my customer file on the screen. If I want to look for duplicate customers or duplicate customer numbers, I can go into Analyze and I can say look for duplicates, detect any duplicates based on my key, which is customer number in ascending order. Go. And it says I have no duplicates. In the same way, I can take the same file and I can say show me gaps. I can go into a different file and pick up, for example, bank transactions. There's my transaction ID, checks, the amount. I can say go and look for duplicate amounts. Go and look for duplicate check numbers. Go and show me missing sequences of check numbers in a bank reconciliation. So that's the kind of thing I can do, and this is a small file. Down at the bottom you'll see there's 1,166 records. I'm talking about using this on something that's got 2 million transactions. And it's literally as easy as that. The trick with any CAAT is know what you want to know before you start. Know what evidence you're looking for, know what it means. I get auditors who tell me, I'm having trouble. I don't know if if I should put this in the report or not. Do you think I should put this in? Is it important? Well, why were you looking for it? If you know why you were looking for it and you find it, you know if that's important. If you know what you're looking for and you don't find it, you know if that's important. But if you don't know whether it's important or not, the chances are you had no idea what you were looking for in the first place. And your chances of a successful audit are not improved by the use of CAATs because you don't know what you're doing. Not you don't know how to run the software, you don't know how to audit this system. Nice thing about generalized audit software, as you saw there, the auditor's got direct control. Development cost is a question of click, click, click. Oh, there's my answer. They're fast to implement. They're not necessarily particularly efficient coding in terms of writing it because they try to be all things to all people. When would you use generalized audit software? Detective examination files. If you want to go into the file and say, show me anything, show me negative stocks, show me negative invoices. It shouldn't be possible to have a negative invoice. If we want to reverse an invoice, we pass a credit note. We do not pass a negative invoice. Why would there be negative invoices? Well, let me give you for instance. When the auditors come at the end of the year and they want to look at the transactions going through the ledger, they will typically take a sample of invoices and a much higher sample of credit notes. They may even look at every credit note to see what it is it authorized, etc. If you've got, over the course of a year, 5 million invoices that have been processed, and you take a sample, what's the chances of you picking up the 10 negative invoices that have been processed? Virtually nil. But if you take all of those and put it into an audit package and say, how many negatives do I have here? Oh, look, there's 5 of them out of the 5 million. Which ones are they? Click. Okay, let me go and check this lot. Where did it come from? Who put it there? So it's a detective examination of the files. I can verify processing controls. I know that what comes in plus what was already there should equal what goes out. I can reproduce that within my CAAT and say, does it match? I'm doing a parallel simulation. I'm taking the processing that normally happens in the system and I'm creating a different version of it and running it in parallel to see if they're coming up with the same results. I can do a straightforward file interrogation and say, I want to see for that customer all the transactions. And one that you've got to watch for, management inquiries. It's very common, unfortunately, that management will turn around and say to the auditors, can you tell me if any of this kind of transaction has happened recently? And the auditors will say, yes, sir, we'll go and have a look at that. Yep, it's happened twice, blah, 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 blah. And they'll say, good, can you do that for me every week? To which the answer should be no. No, I will not do it for you every week, because if I'm doing it for you every week, I'm not auditing the control, I am the control. I will give you an executable version of our interrogation that you can run every week. And then I will come and audit that you are running it and that you're taking the appropriate action based on what you find. I had a friend of mine, he was head of internal audit for a car manufacturer. And they had 3 IT auditors, so they had 3 sets of generalized audit software. In this case, it was ACL. And I saw that he'd bought another 10 copies. And I thought, my God, he's increasing the size of his IT audit. So I phoned him up and said, hey, Carl, what's happening? Oh, yeah, we bought more copies of ACL. I said, why? He said, well, we got fed up with management coming and asking us to do these inquiries, because when they went to IT said, yes, we can do that. We'll have to write a program to do it. It will take a week and it will cost this much to come off your budget. So it was easier to come and ask the auditors. So now when they say, can you do that for us every week? We say, no, but there's a software. You do it yourself. And that's one way of doing it. And that brings us to a second polling question. Second polling question looks at software. Software which comes standard with the machine as an example of generalized audit software, specialized audit software, utility software, or test data generators. Software that came standard with the machine. Once again, you don't have to get it right, but to get the CPD, you do have to vote. I'll give it another 5 seconds. And we'll close the poll. And share the results. We have 68% who said utility software, which is correct. Generalized audit software, very powerful, but unfortunately you've got to go and buy it. Test data generators, very useful for specialized areas, but again, unfortunately, you've got to go and buy it. It doesn't come standard. Utilities come standard with the operating system that you're running on your machine. So what kind of audit software can you in fact get? Well, different packages work in slightly different ways. You get program generators. Program generators where you define to the software what you want this program to do, and it will actually go and write you an application program that will do an interrogation. Okay, and you execute that. And if you want a different program, you go and define that, and it writes another program for you. Macro languages, these are the ACLs and the ideas of this world, where you will say, do that, then that, then that, and it goes and does it for you. Audit-specific tools, including things like data downloaders, PC-based software, etc. So all of these potentially appropriate tools. So how do you pick? Well, you're looking for something that preferably you can run on any hardware or software. Now that means that certain packages are ruled out right away because they were written for a specific environment. If you are running an I-series computer, there is data interrogation software that comes as part of the environment that you can use as a CAAT. That's fine, I can do my interrogations using that as a CAAT, but I cannot run it on anything else. It will only run on that kind of machine. So ideally I want something that will run across different manufacturers, different operating environments, and preferably different machine sizes. So I can run using huge files, I can run using small files, I can run them on a mainframe, on a mini, on a PC, and there are some about that fit those categories. Which one should you buy? It's a question I keep getting asked. We're thinking about buying generalized audit software and we're not sure whether to buy ACL or IDEA. Which is best? And the answer is both of them and neither of them. They leapfrog over each other. So right now you may say that the latest version of IDEA is better than the latest version of ACL. Then ACL comes out with a new version that's better than IDEA. Then IDEA comes out with a new version that's better than ACL. Basically, these software packages do very similar things. Some of them are more user-friendly than others. And my advice to anyone is try a couple of them, because you can download test versions of them, and see which one works best for you. If you already know how to use ACL, go by ACL. If you already know how to get the most out of IDEA, go by IDEA. Okay, which is best? It's the one that you're going to get the most out of, most effectively, most economically. What will the audit software do for me? Well, I can do all kinds of file access, different types of files, variable length files. As I say, variable length blocks can be a bit problematic. We can do arithmetic operations, we can add things up, we can divide them, multiply them out. We can do logic operations, if, and, then, else, not. Exactly the same as you would in a normal computer program. You can do the same thing with our audit software. I want to interrogate for duplicate transactions if the country is South Africa and the date is less than a certain date. Logic operations. We can handle records. We can read them. We can write them. You can update. Now, most audit packages will tell you the big advantage to our audit software is you cannot update live data. No, but I can create a new updated version of the live data. Then I can go into my operating system, and unless I'm prevented from doing so, I can delete the live data and rename my updated version as the live data. So I've just updated the live data. When they say that, what they actually mean is from inside the audit software, you have read-only access to the live data. And that's what we want. We can output to files, and therefore we could change the name and make it the same. We can output to printouts, we can output to screens, we can output in data, we can output in graphics, we can do all kinds of wonderful things. We can do stat sampling in all of its varieties. Now that's not strictly true. We can do statistical sampling in the types of statistical sampling that auditors generally do, okay, within generalized audit software. If you want to get into heavy duty, multiple discriminant regression analysis using Spearman's rank correlation coefficients, then you're going to have to go and buy a package that will do it for you. It's not going to be generalized audit software. I have one that I use called NCSS, Number Crunching Statistical System. There are other ones out there, Stats Professor, etc. I use NCSS because I've got NCSS, and because when I was doing my master's, we used NCSS. So that's the one I knew best. I have to confess that since I did my master's, I've probably used it twice. Okay, I don't normally get into that level of depth of heavy-duty statistical sampling, getting into non-parametric testing, etc., with small populations, looking at standard errors of the estimate and so on. But there's software out there that will do it for me. File comparisons, production of graphics, all standard features within audit software. So how do you determine the appropriate CAAT? Well, the first thing you do is forget the package, forget the software. You start off with saying, what is it I want to know as an auditor? Can I place reliance on the financial accounts? Can I place reliance that no fraud has occurred within anything that moves assets around? What is my objective? And what technique am I going to use? If the evidence is sitting in somebody's brain, I'm going to go and interview them. Now, I can interview them face to face. I can interview them using the telephone. I can interview them on Skype. So I can decide on my technique first. If I'm going to have to look inside the box, then I can look at my application audit, and say, what am I trying to achieve here? Am I trying to verify that the processing is happening and nothing's going missing? Or am I trying to verify that 2 plus 2 equals 4 and will always equal 4? So I want to verify the results of the processing. I said that it depends on our audit objective. Our audit objective depends on our risks. So looking at the areas of controls within our IT systems, we have our application controls, which are unique to individual users' systems. The controls that you're looking for in a payroll are not the same thing that you're looking for in an order processing system, and they're certainly not the same thing that you're looking for in the general ledger. Systems development controls, designed to assure that systems are likely to fulfill their objectives. Physical controls, looking at the control over the physical operating environment. I saw one guy who had developed a software package, a security package, and he was demonstrating it at one of the computer exhibitions, and he said, this package is foolproof. You cannot get at users' data. I said, is that a challenge? He said, if you can do it, it was an Israeli product, he said, I'll give you a free trip to Israel. I said, fine. And I unplugged the computer, picked it up and went to walk out. He said, where are you going? I said, I've just stolen your data. Oh, that's not what I meant. I said, well, I've just stolen your data. Now I've got a year to try and crack it. So physical controls, still critical. System integrity controls, to lock up that logical environment, to make sure that when we say we will have division of duties, we will have division of duties. When we say it's accurate, it will remain accurate. And we need to balance all of these controls. And that brings us to our third polling question. Third polling question looks at the functionality of audit software. Audit software includes all of the following except report handling, file comparisons, arithmetic operations, transaction processing. Give it another 10 seconds. We'll close the poll and share the results. The majority have gone for transaction processing, which would be correct. Audit software does not process transactions. A third of you went for report handling. Now, it's an interesting one when we talk report handling. If we talk in terms of creating reports, audit software does creation of reports. If we talk in terms of bringing information in from reports, then I can do exactly the same thing. This is me back in IDEA again. I can go into IDEA and I can say I want to bring in a file, and the file I'm going to bring is a print report. The print report I'm going to bring in is coming from a project in here. I'm going to pick it up from, what should we pick it up from? Where have I got the report? Let me go and bring it up from a local library. I'll pick it up from my webinar. I'll pick it up from my tutorial. These are reports. So I can pick up something from Dave's bookstore. Now this is a printout. Okay, that's a printout from Dave's bookstore showing customers, etc. I can define each of these individual elements and bring it in as a data file. If I look within it, again, let me go and bring in another one. I'll bring it in, use a different one rather than Dave's bookstore. I can bring up the ABC balance sheet. Okay, so there's a trial balance. And I can define each of the individual fields in this trial balance and bring in the data as if it was a standard data file. Totals, debits, credits, the lot. Okay, and bring that one in. To give you an idea of what it would look like, if I take, for example, my accounts, I may have already imported this. Well, there's Dave's Bookshop. There was the date, the book's title, the amount, the account number. That was all imported directly from that printout. Okay, so I can do all that kind of thing using my audit software. So, CAAT types and their usage. What are we going to use these for? Critical thing to realize, application audit tools are not always CAATs. Okay, what is an application audit tool? Any tangible aid that assists the auditor. And that includes tools to obtain information, tools to evaluate controls, tools to verify controls, and all kinds of automated tools. And being I'll rephrase that, defined as automated tools, they are by definition CAATs. Tools to obtain information. We can use interviews. You can use questionnaires. And you can send questionnaires electronically, bring in the results, and analyze the results electronically. That makes it a CAAT. We talked about using analytical audit flowcharts, using flowcharting software. We can do documentation review by bringing documentation in electronically and then looking for keywords using hypertext searches. That makes it a CAAT. For evaluation, we can do application control matrices, looking at control concerns and components to determine whether the control environment is adequate or inadequate, and whether it's effectively controlled or not. Just to give you an idea, this is a technique I developed, which has become known as the Cascarino cube. And this is a fraud risk example. What we've done is we've taken the organization and we've split it into the different functional areas. We've got accounting, procurement, manufacturing, marketing, warehousing, sales, etc. Within each of those slices, we've got different things that happen. And we've got different key components. We have our management. We've got our employees. We've got vendors. We've got customers. We've got specific concerns. We worry about misconduct, fraud reporting, misappropriation of assets, improper expenditure, the obtaining of assets, and expense avoidance. Now, these are all things that I can sit down with management and say, okay, tell me what the risks are. Tell me what could go wrong. Okay, well, we've got all these different things that can go wrong. We can summarize them and come up with 4 or 5, 6 different areas that management are concerned about. When we talk about misconduct, we mean A, B, C, D, E. That's not me, that's not you, that's management. That's what they are worried about in this particular organization, in accounting or in marketing. What are they worried about? And we can rank those risks so that we put our high risk areas over to our left hand side and our most critical functional components up to the top. So this quadrant up here is the bit where I want as close to 100% effective control as I can get. Down here, we're not saying there's no risk at the bottom, but what we are saying is this in the bottom right hand side is comparatively our lowest risk area. Down there, we're looking for as close to 100% efficient control as we can get. We're not going to spend $1 million to control 20. 20 million, yes, not 20 bucks. So down on the right bottom, we're looking for efficient control. And the bit in between is where you're trading off effective control versus efficient control. So now each of these areas I can go into and I can say in accounting, Mr., Miss, or Ms. Manager, what controls do you have that would prevent misconduct of management? What controls would you have that would detect misconduct of management? And what controls do you have that would allow you to fix misconduct of management? Well, we've got disciplinary procedures, we've got this, we've got that, we've got the rule book, we've got all kinds of wonderful things. We have supervisory review even of our management and so on. Now, all I'm asking is what controls can you tell me that you are relying on? I'm not saying that those controls work, I'm not saying they're good, I'm just saying what controls do you have? So I can say, okay, control number 1 is good supervision. Control number 2 is our disciplinary procedures. Once I've got those controls, I can say, okay, good supervision. Does that help fraud of management? How about misappropriation of assets by management? How about improper expenditure by management? Does supervision help there? So I can take that one control and place it in every block in there where it has an impact. Once I've got all of those listed, I will put them into an Excel spreadsheet. I can then look at misappropriation of assets and say, if all of those controls function as intended, do we have enough control? And if the answer is no, then I know before I even start, we're going to need extra controls in there. And because I know what those controls are not controlling, I know what my recommendation is going to be. It's going to be a new control and it's going to address this risk. So let's assume that those controls function. If they function as intended, we've got enough control. So now all I have to do is test them. But test which controls. Are they all equally important? In this area of misconduct of management within accounting, it could be authorization levels, it could be reconciliations, it could be whatever. Which controls are going to give me 90% of the control elements I'm looking for? Because those are the ones I'm going to go and test. And once I've tested them, then I can come to a conclusion whether control in this area is efficient and effective. And that's all done by putting that together. That was put together using Visio, and all of the rest was done using nested Excel spreadsheets. So under those circumstances, Visio is now a CAAT, Excel spreadsheets are now a CAAT. Not interrogating software, we're not looking for missing items, we're looking at putting together an overall plan. So that's one type of CAAT, CAATs for control evaluation. We can also use CAATs for control verification. Control verification we can test around the data, around the system. We can see if the controls work, if the numbers come out correctly. We can also process test data, as I said. If we know that putting 2, we've got 5 in stock, you put in -2, you should end up with 3. Do we end up with 3? You can test that. The difficulty is being able to test every possible combination. We can reperform key functions. So where we have, for example, a calculation, let's say we're looking at auditing a bank, and we're looking at auditing the overnight interest calculations on accounts. And we know if it's a deposit account and the value in the account is up to that level, they get so much percent. And if it's over that level, they get so much more percent or less percent for that type of account with that kind of balance. So now I can take all of the balances, take those rules and put them into my audit software and say, run. Here's all of the overnight interest calculations. Compare that to what the live system did. Is it matching? If not, why not? Anything that's going on within the organization where there are rules, you can reset those rules in your generalized audit software and you can reperform what is supposed to be happening in the computer. We can reprocess selected items and see if it comes up with the same answer. So, what techniques can we use overall? Well, first one, and possibly the least used these days, is source code review. Okay, source code review, when we talked on the first webinar in this series, we talked about writing programs, writing source code. You can do a review of the source code. The problem is you've got maybe 20,000 lines of code in a small program, and you're looking at this to try and find out, is it doing what it's supposed to be doing? Many years ago, when I was a programmer, I was working in Scotland for a small firm who shall remain nameless, but for the sake of argument we'll call NCR. And I was sent down to London because they had got a package from NCR in Germany, in Augsburg in Germany, and there was a bug somewhere in the software, and they didn't have anyone in London who could program in COBOL, so they sent me down. And I picked up the software, and now I've got a problem because this software was written in German, and I don't speak German. So all of the data names were in German, all of the paragraph names were in German, and I'm trying to debug this thing, and it took me day after day after day to go through one program. It is slow, it is expensive, it is incredibly boring, and it may prove very little. If you find nothing wrong, it does not mean that there's nothing wrong. It means that you found nothing wrong. But it can be useful for a specialized review. When I was working for Coopers, one of our depots sent me up a fax of 200 lines of coding and said, can you tell us what this thing does? So I went through it and I said, well, it appears to be performing interest calculations, and here are the rules which are applying. This is how it has been coded. And I sent that back down to them. They said, thank you very much. That's how it's supposed to work. We are happy. I said, great. Now, how sure are you that the bit you sent me is the live program? Oh. How do we check that? I said, you call me down and I'll check it for you. They didn't. They just worked on the assumption that it was probably the live program. That could be a big assumption. Confirmation of results, also known as debtor certification. It's slow, it's uncertain. It only shows up errors in your favor. Nobody ever contacts you and says, no, we owe you more than that. They only ever say, no, that's too much. I don't owe you as much as that. And it's very labor intensive. But it may be the only way that you can go. If I can do debtor certification by comparing electronically what my debtor system says to their creditor system, if I can ask them to send me what their system says and then do a match electronically, it's a hell of a lot easier. Test data, as I said, you can use it to test the system. The problem, you've got to test both correct data and errors. Now, the nice thing about test data is you don't need to be a programmer. All you have to know is what's supposed to happen and then run test data through to see if it does happen. Problem, it lacks objectivity. It's influenced by what you expect to happen. So if you believe that transactions above a certain amount are supposed to be handled this way and below it are supposed to be happened that way, that's where you're going to test. And again, it assumes that the program that's being tested is in fact the live system, and it may not be. It may be one that's kept for the auditors. Even if it is the live program, typically you're not testing it in a live environment, you're testing it in a test environment. So it may not perform the same in the live environment. But again, it may be an appropriate technique under limited circumstances. The integrated test facility. Now this is a very popular one with certain auditors. Wearing my auditor's hat is an excellent technique. Wearing my IT hat, if I ever caught an auditor doing it, they'd go out, not out the door, they'd go through the door. The problem is, an integrated test facility is designed to integrate your auditor's test data with the live data. So typically, if you were doing this on a payroll, you would get the payroll department to set up a Department 99 for you. And then you will process data through the normal live system as it routinely runs on the live environment. And you'll add people to your Department 99 and you'll kill them off and you'll marry them and you'll divorce them and you'll make them leavers and you'll resurrect them as leavers and you'll do all the kind of things that you would normally do. Okay. Problem. You've got to make sure that none of those people are going to get a salary at the end of the month. Not only that, you're going to have to exclude them from the results that you hand over to the IRS. And excluding them is not a question of reversing the transaction, because that will show up. Here is a transaction and it was reversed. And if the taxman audits you, they're going to turn around and say, what's this transaction? Why was it reversed? Oh, that was an auditor's test. Yeah, pull the other one. It's got bells on. We don't believe you. You must pay. And you're now into major, major battle. It's under your control, because you're the one that's running the ITF. If you are going to use this to see how the system works, that's possibly excusable. If you're going to use this to see if the system works, that is not excusable. Because if you prove that the system doesn't work, you have just crashed the live payroll. Nobody will get paid tomorrow because the auditors were running a test. This will not win you friends and influence people. So ITS, very powerful. The problem with it is you do it without telling anyone that you're doing it, because that could influence the test. But the ones who are going to have to pick up the pieces if you crash the system are IT. And the ones who are going to get the blame for a crashing are IT. Don't expect them to be happy if they find out that auditors were testing the system. Nice thing about it, once again, like test data, you don't need technical training. You don't need to be a programmer. It's a low processing cost. If you're processing 500,000 transactions a day, processing an extra 20 isn't going to cost anything. It tests the system as it routinely operates. Because it's working as it routinely operates, it should be understood by all of the users, IT, everyone else. And because you're processing it through live data, it tests the manual function as well as the computer function. But you've got to get those transactions out before they interfere with live totals. And that could mean that you're going to have to process a single-sided journal entry to get them out. You're going to have to edit live data to remove them completely. And that means that you're going to mess around with the live system. If it means that you're going to have to change the live system to allow single-sided journal entries, you have just compromised the security on your live system. So there's a high cost if those live systems require modification. You're affecting the live files, there's a danger of destruction. In the same way as running test data, it's difficult to identify all possible exception conditions, so your quantity of test data will be limited. Okay. Snapshot technique. Snapshot technique is a form of transaction trail where identifiable inputs are tagged, and then a trail is produced as it goes through the processing inside the system to see what's happening now, what's happening now, what's happening now. Useful in high volume systems. If you're dealing in big data, that can be a good way of doing it. It's used extensively by IS staff when they're testing systems. Okay. It's the same equivalent as a man jumping off the top of the Empire State Building. And as he passes each floor, people can hear him say, okay, so far, okay, so far, okay, so far. It's a sudden stop at the end that's a problem. And the same with the snapshot technique. Sampling. It was Benjamin Disraeli, the Prime Minister of Britain in the late 1800s, who said there are three kinds of liars: liars, damned liars, and statistics. Okay. Statistics can be very powerful as an audit tool, particularly for audit quality control. When you are not going to look at 100% of a population because it's not desirable, because it's not possible, because it's too expensive, then we can work, if we use sampling the appropriate way, in a high volume system, we can look at a few to gain conclusions about many. And we can work, I said, at quality control, we can start off by saying we require to be 95% confident. And any opinion that we express will be at a 95% confidence level. The following is true. Problem is that in many cases it's not well understood by auditors. Even if you're using audit software, we use audit software to do the sampling, but what do the answers mean? In a computer, you may be able to do 100% sampling. If you do 100% sampling, you're not doing a sample, you're doing a survey. Okay? And it may be practical, but it may not be desirable. Even if you can use the computer to extract every single purchase order in the machine, are you now going to check every single signature in the purchase order? The fact that the computer can extract the information for you to test doesn't mean to say you're necessarily going to be using the computer to perform the test. Types of stat sampling, and again, these are standard within the audit packages: attribute sampling, variable sampling, systematic selection, random selection, stratified random selection, discovery sampling, stop and go sampling. All of these are possible, and if I drop back into my idea, where is my idea? I'm back in my idea. And if we look within idea, I can take my data. I'll pick up my customer database again. And now if I go and look at analysis, over on the right hand side you can see sampling. So I can do attribute sampling, I can do monetary sampling, I can do variable sampling, I can do systematic sampling, stratified random sampling, I can generate random numbers, I can do straightforward random sampling. All of the standard stuff. It comes with it pre-built in. Now all I have to do is get back in to my PowerPoint slideshow. Okay, so I can do all of those kinds of things. I can also get back in running my slideshow from here. I can also do my parallel simulations. Now, a parallel simulation is taking the same input data that's going through the live system, using the same files, but using a version of the program that I created in my generalized audit software, or I had written for me, or whatever. It's got to come from a different source. There's no point in going to the programmer who wrote the live system and say, you know how the balance sheet is calculated. Can you write me a separate program that will calculate it? Because all they're going to do is copy the code. So it's got to come from a different source, theoretically, to produce the same output. And if we do that, and if that works, then that takes us to our next polling question. And our next polling question says, reperformance of key functions is an example of control evaluation, control verification, confirmation of results, or source code review. Please vote now. And we have almost everyone voted. I'll close the poll. I will close the poll. And share the results. Now we've got some real split votes. Now remember what we said. Confirmation of results we can do using our audit software. Control verification, the same thing. We know it's not source code review. We can use, funnily enough, we can use it for control evaluation, for control verification, and for confirmation of results. So in actual fact, all of the above. Isn't it powerful when you start looking at it? So let's take a look at CAATs. What can go wrong? Okay, common CAAT problems. First problem, getting the wrong file. So you're doing the right interrogation, you're doing the right technique, you're using the right software, but you're not looking at the live file, you're looking at a test version. Or you're not looking at this year's, you're looking at last year's. But you've got one way or the other, you've got the wrong file. Now it could be that you thought you knew where the file was, or it could be that you asked IT and they thought they knew where the file was, or it could be that they kept one specially for you. Getting the wrong layout. Many years ago, a friend of mine in the UK was auditing a company, and he was looking at their Irish depot, and he wanted to find out how many female employees there were in order to make sure they were complying with labour legislation and equal opportunities, etc. So he got the payroll master file, and he looked at the layout of the payroll master file, and he said, well, the first 5 digits is employee number, then comes their surname, which is 20 digits, then comes the first name, which is 10 digits, then comes the sex code, which is 1 digit. So if I add all of these up, I know exactly where to look for the sex code. So I will interrogate that position and see how many Fs we have for female. None. Must be capital F. So let me look for capital F. None. So I've got no females. Let me just check how many males do we have. Small m or large m? None. Oh, great. So we don't have any males, we don't have any females. What do we have? What's in that position? And they found one person had G. Okay, so we don't have any males, we don't have any females. We've got a G. What's a G? General? And what they found when they interrogated was the file layout had changed. The 20-digit surname was fine until they took on a new employee called Seamus O'Shaughnessy McGurk. And O'Shaughnessy McGurk would not fit into 20 digits, so they made it 30 digits, which meant everything to the right moved along 10 characters. But when he looked for the sex code, he only found one employee whose surname was longer than that, and in position 21 was the G from O'Shaughnessy McGurk. Now, that's an obvious one. If you've got 20 people on the payroll and none of them are male, none of them are female, there's something wrong. The problem comes when you get the wrong layout, which is wrong but plausible. It could be right. Then you don't necessarily know that you've got the wrong layout. Why was there a problem in the first place? Because nobody had kept the documentation up to date. Documentation out of date, death for CAATs. And prejudging the results, deciding what you believe is going to be true, and then looking for a CAAT that will prove it. Rough rule of thumb, never believe what the first printout tells you, particularly if it's what you wanted to hear. Check it. Remember, when you're dealing with auditing application systems, in any application system, try to identify the controls that the user is relying on. Remember always, documentation, whether it's run documentation or user documentation or system manuals, is often misleading because it's not being kept up to date. Remember also, not everything needs to be audited. You're looking to audit the critical areas, get the biggest bang for the buck. You're not a programmer, it's not a problem. What's written into the program has to mirror what is happening in the business. Program logic should be mirroring business logic. And if you're stuck, you can always ask for help. I know that auditors, particularly IT auditors, do not like asking IT for help. Now, partly that's because they don't want to look stupid. Believe me, if you come to the wrong conclusion because you've been looking at the wrong thing, you are going to look stupid. More stupid than if you turned around and said, listen, I need that file. Where do I get it? Okay, how do I know that's the right one? Do you have a printout from the live system that I can run some tests on to compare to what's going to come out of this file? You can always ask for help. If you believe that there is a fraud going on, then you can always ask for help, but you're not necessarily going to believe it. Industry-related software, in addition to the standard generalized audit software, specialized audit software, you can get audit procedures commonly available for accounts receivable, for payroll, for general ledger, for inventories, etc. Some of them are standard. They come with that particular software package. Some of them can be customized, but you can also get industry-related audit software for financial services, banks, healthcare, insurance companies, etc. If you are auditing for compliance with Solvency II for an insurance company, you can get software that's specifically designed for Solvency II. If you're auditing for Basel compliance, you can get software that's specifically designed to look at critical elements for Basel. We've got our generalized software. We've got industry-related software. Problem with the industry-related software, if you are buying a package to run against something that you wrote yourself, then you may have to convert your file layouts to the standard package layouts. Then select the appropriate parameters before you can run the software. And that means that as an auditor, you're going to have a fair degree of IS skills, either to do the conversion or to verify that that conversion brought everything across as it should be and nothing has changed in between. The software itself is normally very cost effective and normally very efficient in processing. Customized software we've talked about to run in unique circumstances, to perform unique tests, to perform outputs and produce them in unique formats. They're expensive to develop. Even if you're not developing it, you require a high level of IS skills to verify it, and it may not tell you what you think it does. But under certain circumstances, it may be the only viable solution you've got. If you're dealing with a computer system that uses weird and wonderful, strange structures and layouts, etc., you may not be able to use your generalized audit software. You may be able to, but you may have to have some customized audit software to convert to that format for your generalized audit software before you can even start. Information retrieval software. These are the standard packages, report writers, query languages, etc., that may have come with the application system. They were not written for auditors, but a lot of them do the same kind of things that auditors do. You can do lots of common audit routines, and they include standard report writers, program generators, even fourth generation languages that you can buy and use instead of generalized audit software. If you're going to buy, you might as well buy the generalized audit software, but if you've already got those inside the computer, if IT has already bought those, if the user's already bought those, then use them if they fit the bill. Remember, generalized audit software written specifically for auditors. Now, I've had auditors turn around and say to me, well, why should I use IDEA? Why not just use Excel? And the answer is there's nothing that you can do in IDEA that you couldn't do in Excel. But it may be easier in IDEA, it may be faster in IDEA. Let me put it to you this way. Microsoft's internal audit function went out and bought generalized audit software. And if you work for Microsoft and you're going to buy a package that isn't made by Microsoft, you better have a damn good business case. Okay. So this stuff is designed specifically for examining records, testing calculations, comparing data, comparing audit data to other sources of data. Benefits, they can handle big volumes. If I think on IDEA, IDEA can handle, it goes beyond mega, giga. It's about 3 levels above that is the volume it can handle. Okay. There are restrictions if you're using Excel on the sizes of files that you can manipulate. If you're using ACL or IDEA, you are way beyond those levels. The outputs can be used for further computer processing. The time to audit can be reduced, which frees the auditor up, theoretically, to spend time interpreting the results, or reading the newspaper, or playing on a cell phone, or anything else. But theoretically, the reason we're doing it is to spend time interpreting the results. It limits the programming skills required. You don't need to be a programmer. And it means you don't have to rely on IT staff. You may find, depending on the package that you've got, that the hardware and software environments may be restrictive. Okay, many years ago, a small firm who shall remain nameless, but for the sake of argument we'll call KPMG, had a very, very powerful package called System 2190, which they developed themselves. tremendous package, excellent software. Problem was it would only run in certain environments. Okay. As far as I know, they're no longer using it. Number of files handleable may be restrictive. Types of record structures may not be comprehensive. Number of computations may be limited. Number of reports for pass can be restrictive. Your limiting factor in many of the generalized audit software packages is the speed that you can read a whole disk. Okay, if you've got 10 million transactions or 10 million records on a file, how quickly can your machine read that disk? And it's not the speed of the machine, it's the speed of the disk access. So I'd rather pass the disk once and do 20 different things on one pass rather than have to do it 20 times. Again, the modern generalized audit software, very efficient, and most of those limitations you can bypass, but you need to check that you can. And that brings us to polling question number 5. Polling question number 5 is looking primarily at customized audit software. Customized audit software, we're looking for what is it? When can you use it? It can run in unique circumstances. It requires conversion of input to standard package needs. It includes report writers. It may not be able to handle all file types. This is customized audit software. Audit software that's been written specially for you. Just about finished. 100% voted. I'll close it and share the results. And we've got a split between can run in unique circumstances and may not be able to handle all file types. Okay, remember what we're dealing with. We're dealing with customized audit software. If it's being customized, it will be customized for the file type I want to look at. It can run in unique circumstances. As a general tool, it may not be able to handle all file types, but it will be able to handle the file type that I want to handle because that's why I had it written. Okay. So let's hide the results and finish up. Okay. Just to give you an example of other things you can do with CAATs. There's an example of Excel as a CAAT, where I'm saying here are my records and I'm looking for that particular information. Go search it for me. ACL is a CAAT. Now you may notice that ACL looks very similar to IDEA. I've actually got both ACL and IDEA, and sometimes I use one, sometimes I use the other. It just depends. If I'm dealing with, as a consultant, and I'm working with an internal audit function where they've already got IDEA, then I'll use IDEA so that I can port my results across to their software. If they've got ACL, I'll use ACL so I can port across there. Under normal circumstances, I would normally use IDEA because I've probably used IDEA more than I've used ACL, so I'm more comfortable with it. But I run training courses on IDEA, and I also run training courses on ACL. So I can do it with either. You'll notice they look very similar, and they do very similar things. That is IDEA. And if you look at that, compared to that, it looks like, funnily enough, to a large extent, that. They were all designed to look basically like MS Office, so they would be user-friendly. Now, all of these CAATs are wonderful if you can get your hands on the data. So one of the first things you're going to have to do is import the data. Okay, and the reason I say import the data rather than hit the live data is twofold. If you go for the live data, even if you're interrogating it in read-only, guaranteed if anything goes wrong with that live system, for the next 6 months they're going to say it's never worked properly since the auditors looked at it. So you're going to take the blame. So you don't want to hit the live data, you want to hit a copy of the live data. And we bring the copy to the audit machine, because I may do the tests now and I may produce the results for my boss. My boss might turn around and say, have you looked at that as well? Oh, I'll go and do that. Now, if I'm using live data, the live data has moved on since I did my interrogation. If I've got a copy of the live data, I can reanalyze it later on. And with audit software, I can slice it vertically, horizontally, diagonally. I can do anything to it. And you cannot corrupt live data by working on a copy of it, unless you are deliberately doing it using something other than your audit software. So you bring it into the audit software. It depends on the software you're using. Most of the modern systems can import from a variety of data types. And again, if I jump back into my idea, and I can go and look at bringing in data, you can see within my import facility, I can bring in from AS400s or iSeries. I can bring in from DBase, I can bring in from Microsoft Access, bring in from Excel, bring in from ODBC. Now, we talked about ODBC when we talked about databases. ODBC is Open Database Connectivity, which is basically a standard that was drawn up for relational databases. And to import from an ODBC database, all I need to do is on my machine load in the ODBC drivers into Windows or into bringing them in for Unix or whatever system I'm using. And once those drivers are in, I can then access that information. And it will port in all of the metadata from my data dictionary when I'm importing. I can also, as I said, bring in from print reports, Adobe PDFs, a Smart Reporter from SAP, SAP AIS. I can bring in text files, I can bring XML files in. I can pick up any of these if I have the appropriate drivers on my system. So with that in mind, I can then go ahead and import my data. I need to know what's where in the data. If it's coming in from ODBC, it's coming in with it predefined. If it's coming in through through Excel, it's coming in with the information predefined. If it's coming in through a flat file, I need to know what the data looks like. So that data layout is critical. As I said, it may pick it up from the metadata. It may pick it up from ODBC databases, Excel layouts, etc. If you've got a flat file, you need that file layout and you need to get it from IT. And you have to make sure that the file layout matches the file you're looking at. Acquiring the data, if all you can get is a hard copy, you can always ask, can you print it to a file instead? Preferably file comma delimited, because then I can bring it in through Excel. Comma delimited, simply Fred Smith, comma, internal audit, comma, date, comma, and it's easy for the software to identify individual fields. If it's a printout, you can ask them to print it to a file. If they can't print it to a file, ask for it to be printed in a printout and then scan it in. And if they print it to an 80-character file, that's great. If they print it to 120 characters in the printer, they print it to 132 characters in a bigger printer. If they print it on multiple lines, it doesn't matter. We can bring it in. If it's one field of 120 characters, we can then define the individual fields within the 120. Apologies. And I can define different layouts for different rows. So now you've got the data. Now what? Make sure it's what you asked for. Timeliness, is it the right time period? Accuracy, is it the live data? Is it all there? It's embarrassing to say the information is wrong, only to find that you were given the wrong file. It's even worse if you say this data is fine, computer system is perfect, only to find out you were looking at the wrong file. So check against anything you already know, control totals, hash totals, dates, transactions. And remember, never believe what the first printout tells you. From your manual audit, you know what you were looking for. It seems to be the right data. You know what you wanted to find. You know where the data resided. Now you've got the data. Go ahead with the analysis. Now you've got an answer, and you've checked the answer. And now you can start drawing your conclusions. Remember, modern audit software can handle almost any data structure. We can take in any format, even PDFs. If IT has it in a file, we'll take it from there. If they say, but tell us how you want it, I want it raw, and I'll pick it up from there. Once you've got the data, you've still got to run your tests, interpret the results, form your conclusions, and hopefully, if something's wrong, convince someone to do something. If it's a fraud, you're going to have to maintain the chain of custody of that digital evidence, because you may be up in court providing expert testimony. So make sure you've got strength in depth. And that brings us to our final polling question for this session. And the final polling question involves acquiring data. Acquiring the data requires assurance that the data is all there, last week's, the live file, or available electronically. We're almost complete. And I'll close the poll and share the results. Majority of people have gone for all there. I would agree with you on the live file if we are looking at the current situation. But I could be coming in to audit what the position was last month, or 3 months ago, or at the year end. And we've moved on past the year end. So it may not be the live file that I want to look at. But whatever file it is, I do need to make sure that it's all there. And that brings us to the end of the webinar. Are there any questions? Don't be shy.
Richard, I don't know if you saw the one question that came in about the external auditor best identify.
Yes.
Okay.
We answered that.
Okay, terrific.
That. At least I think I answered that.
Okay. Well, if there are no other questions, I want to thank you for today's webinar and wish everybody a good day. I just wanted to update you on a change in the schedule. Richard next Thursday has been asked to speak at Parliament in South Africa, so he cannot do the webinar. Now, it's not this Thursday. It's May the 14th. So what we've done is we've revised the schedule and pushed all of the webinars back to the next session. So May 14th will be on May 19th, May 19th on May 21st, May 21st on the 26th, the 26th on the 28th, and then May 28th will be on June the 2nd. So just to let you know that you should be getting an update on those, and you should be okay as far as attending the events as soon as you register. So it's 1 o'clock. I want to wish everybody a good day, and thank you again. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Bye.